The road was supposed to be a shortcut. It had looked straightforward on the map, just a quiet country lane winding through sleepy fields and sparse woodland. But as the sky turned from dusky gray to inky black, and the first whispers of a mist curled around the edges of my headlights, I realized I'd made a mistake. The GPS lost signal somewhere miles back. My phone battery was on its last flicker, leaving me with nothing but a growing sense of isolation. The countryside stretched endlessly, every turn looking the same as the last, the occasional gnarled tree looming like some skeletal sentinel. I hadn't seen another car, another sign of life, in over an hour. Then in the distance, a faint glow emerged, a beacon of light where none should have been. I slowed the car, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. It wasn't the warm yellow of a house or the harsh white of a street lamp. It was something colder, the kind of light that flickered uncertainly, like a candle flame battling against a wind. Curiosity, or maybe desperation, got the better of me. I pulled over onto the gravel shoulder and stepped out into the night. The cold hit me immediately, sharp and biting, carrying a dampness that clung to my skin. Ahead, through a patch of skeletal trees, I could just make out the outline of a structure. Its jagged edges jutted against the sky like broken teeth. The Abbey. I had seen its name in passing on a roadside plaque earlier. St. Emrys Abbey. It was nothing but a historical footnote now, abandoned for centuries after its monks had mysteriously disappeared. People in nearby towns whispered about it in half-forgotten folklore, about strange lights, the sound of bells ringing in the dead of night, and a cursed monk who never left. The light glimmered again, leaking through the fractured stained glass of the ruined windows. My heart pounded as I pushed through the underbrush, feeling thorns snag at my jeans. Every instinct in my body told me to turn back, to leave whatever it was undisturbed. But something stronger, curiosity, or perhaps that inexplicable pull some places seem to have, drew me forward. The Abbey was closer now, its towering facade casting long shadows over the grass and broken gravestones that dotted the yard. Time and weather had battered the stonework, but even in ruin, it held an almost reverent grandeur. When I stepped through the gaping wooden doorway, the air changed. It wasn't just colder. It was thick, suffocating, carrying a faint metallic tang. My footsteps echoed unnaturally in the cavernous space, each one bouncing back at me louder than it should have been. And that's when I saw him. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, just a shadow pooling near the altar. But the longer I stared, the clearer he became. A figure draped in flowing robes, standing utterly still. The hood obscured his face, but his presence was unmistakable. He was watching me, not with eyes I could see, but with a cold, unrelenting intensity that sent a chill racing down my spine. I wanted to move, either closer or away, I wasn't sure, but my legs refused to obey. It wasn't fear that froze me, not entirely. It was something else, something more primal. The figure by the altar was so still it could have been a statue, but statues didn't exude such a suffocating presence. The longer I looked, the more the shadows around him seemed to writhe, as though they were alive, drawn to him like moths to flame. "Hello?" My voice sounded small, swallowed by the vaulted ceiling above. It echoed back to me, distorted, as though the Abbey were mocking me for even trying to break the silence. The monk didn't respond. I stepped forward, each movement heavy and deliberate, my shoes crunching on loose gravel that had crept in from the ruined walls. The glow I had seen outside dimmed slightly, as though whatever source was illuminating the space disapproved of my approach. And then, he moved. Not a turn of the head or a shift of the shoulders, but a single deliberate raising of his arm. His hand emerged from the sleeve of his tattered robe, skeletal, with flesh that looked thin as parchment, barely clinging to the bone. He pointed to something on the far side of the room, where the remains of a wooden staircase spiraled upward into darkness. I didn't want to follow his gesture, but my eyes betrayed me, tracing the line of his bony finger. My heart sank when I realized what he was indicating. The staircase. It led to the Abbey's upper floor, where I knew nothing good waited. A cold gust of air swept through the hall, extinguishing whatever faint glow remained, plunging the space into near darkness. Only the faintest outlines of the monk and the altar remained visible, bathed in the faint silver light of the moon filtering through the broken windows. "No," I whispered, backing up instinctively. "I'm not—" Before I could finish, the monk turned his hooded head toward me. Though I couldn't see his face, the weight of his gaze was undeniable. It rooted me in place, as though chains had sprung from the ground and locked around my ankles. A sound broke the silence then, soft at first, like distant murmuring. It grew louder, filling the space with a dissonant harmony of voices speaking over one another. I could make out snippets of Latin, frantic prayers, and agonized wails. From the corners of the Abbey, movement stirred. Shapes began to emerge, faint, translucent forms of men in tattered habits. Their faces were gaunt, hollow, as though life had been drained from them long ago. They clawed at the air, their mouths open in silent screams, but they did not move toward me. Instead, they orbited the monk, their translucent forms flickering in and out of sight. I turned, desperate to leave, but the doorway was gone. Where there had been a broken arch moments before, there was now only solid stone. My chest tightened as I fought for breath, my pulse thundering in my ears. The monk lowered his hand, and the whispering stopped. Silence fell again, more oppressive than the noise had been. And then he did something that turned my blood to ice. He began to walk toward me. The monk's footsteps echoed unnaturally, each one sharp and deliberate, like a gavel striking stone. He didn't hurry. There was no need. His slow, purposeful approach carried the certainty of inevitability, as though he knew I had nowhere to go. I stumbled backward, my mind racing. The walls felt closer now, the air heavier. It wasn't just fear. It was as though the Abbey itself was alive, closing in on me, trapping me. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice cracking. My hands fumbled for something, anything, to defend myself, but all I found was dust and shards of crumbled stone. The monk didn't stop, his hooded head tilted slightly as though he were studying me. From within the depths of his cowl came a sound, a low, guttural whisper. It wasn't English or any language I recognized, but the cadence of it was unmistakable. A prayer, or perhaps a curse. The whispering grew louder, resonating off the walls and rising to a fever pitch. The translucent figures I'd seen earlier began to appear again, their forms more distinct now. They moved like a tide, circling the monk and me, their hollow eyes fixed on me with expressions of unbearable grief and accusation. And then, the shadows came alive. At first I thought it was just a trick of the flickering light, but no. The darkness itself shifted and swirled, coalescing into long, tendril-like shapes that snaked across the floor and walls. They moved with a predatory intent, sliding toward me with an unnatural grace. I bolted. My feet carried me toward the staircase the monk had pointed to earlier, the only path available. The rotten wood groaned beneath my weight as I ascended, but I didn't stop. I could feel the cold tendrils of shadow licking at my heels, hear the mournful cries of the apparitions growing louder. When I reached the top, I found myself in what must have once been the monks' dormitory. The walls were cracked and peeling, the floor strewn with broken furniture and debris. At the far end of the room, a massive iron cross hung from the wall, tarnished and blackened with age. But it wasn't the cross that caught my attention. It was the book. Resting on a broken lectern in the center of the room, it seemed to pulse faintly with an inner light, its cracked leather cover inscribed with runes I couldn't recognize. The air around it vibrated, charged with a malevolent energy that made my skin crawl. Behind me, the monk's chant grew louder, reverberating through the abbey. The shadows pooled at the foot of the stairs, rising higher with each passing moment. I didn't know why, but I was certain the book was important. The monk had driven me here for a reason. My hands shook as I reached for it, the air around me growing colder with each step. When my fingers brushed the cover, the chant stopped. For one brief, terrifying moment, there was only silence. And then, the screaming began. The screaming was like nothing I had ever heard before. It wasn't human, at least not entirely. It was layered, a cacophony of tortured voices all crying out in pain and fury, reverberating through the walls and shaking the floor beneath me. I stumbled back, clutching the book to my chest. Its surface was freezing cold, so cold it burned, and yet I couldn't bring myself to let it go. It pulsed faintly in my hands, each throb in sync with the dreadful wails echoing around me. The monk appeared at the top of the stairs. He didn't climb them. He simply was there, as though the shadows themselves had delivered him. His form seemed larger now, his robes billowing as if caught in an unfelt wind. The hood still obscured his face, but the faintest glimmer of hollow, sunken eyes shone through. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted, my voice barely audible over the rising din. The monk raised his skeletal hand again, pointing directly at the book. The chanting resumed, low and guttural, words rolling off his tongue with the weight of centuries behind them. The shadows responded, crawling up the walls, reaching for me with a terrifying hunger. Instinct screamed at me to run, but there was nowhere to go. The staircase was gone, swallowed by the darkness. The only thing I had was the book, and something deep within me knew it was the key. I opened it. The pages were ancient, their edges crumbling under my trembling fingers. Symbols I didn't recognize filled each page, glowing faintly with an eerie, shifting light. My eyes were drawn to one passage in particular, the words seeming to burn themselves into my mind. Expurgere maledictum, vide in lucem. The monk reacted immediately, his chant faltering as though I had just spoken something forbidden. His hooded head tilted back, and a deep, guttural growl erupted from within him. The shadows surged forward, faster and more frenzied, their tendrils snapping at my ankles. I stumbled toward the tarnished iron cross on the wall, the book still clutched tightly in my hands. I didn't know what I was doing. Didn't know if I even believed in any of this. But some primal instinct took over. I pressed the open book against the cross. A burst of light erupted, blinding in its intensity. The screams reached a deafening pitch, the apparitions wailing as their forms dissolved into nothingness. The monk staggered, his skeletal hands clutching at his robes as the light engulfed him. For a moment, I thought it was over. And then, the monk began to laugh. It was a dry, rasping sound, devoid of joy. The light dimmed, and I realized with dawning horror that he wasn't gone. He was stronger now, his form solidifying, the shadows retreating into him like a tide returning to the sea. "You cannot break the curse!" a voice echoed, low and hollow. It wasn't coming from the monk, but from all around me, as if the abbey itself were speaking. The book grew heavier in my hands, its glow fading as the monk began to advance once more. The monk moved with newfound purpose now, his skeletal frame less ethereal, more grounded. His hollow eyes burned with a dim, malevolent light, and the air around him seemed to warp, pulling toward him like he was a black hole of despair. My grip tightened on the book, but its pulsing energy had stopped. The power I'd felt moments ago was gone, leaving only a dead weight in my hands. Panic clawed at my chest as I backed away, my shoulder brushing against the crumbling wall of the abbey's upper chamber. The iron cross was still there, scorched black from the burst of light, but useless now. "You must choose," the voice came again, reverberating through the room. It was neither male nor female, but ancient and commanding. The monk's head snapped toward me at the sound, his skeletal hand extending, fingers curling as though to beckon, or to choke the life out of me. Choose? Choose what? The floor beneath me began to crack, thin fissures spreading like veins through the stone. From within them, a faint red glow emerged, accompanied by a sickly heat that felt as though it would boil my skin. The apparitions were gone now, their sorrowful forms consumed by whatever darkness the monk had unleashed. I looked down at the book, frantically flipping through its pages. The symbols blurred and shifted, impossible to read. But one thing caught my eye, a faint imprint beneath the text, like a hidden message that revealed itself in the dim light. It was a symbol, a circle bisected by a jagged line, the same symbol that adorned the monk's robes. Realization struck like a thunderclap. This wasn't just a curse, it was a ritual, a cycle. The monk wasn't haunting the abbey out of vengeance. He was a prisoner, bound to the abbey's power. But if that was true, why was he driving me to this point? Why lead me to the book, the cross, the choice? The fissures widened, the glow intensifying. A roar echoed from below, a deep, guttural sound that made my bones vibrate. The monk took another step, his tattered robes trailing behind him like liquid shadow. And then I understood. I wasn't here to end the curse. I was here to continue it. The book had been left for me. The cross, a symbol of false hope. The monk's imprisonment was a cycle, and I was next in line to take his place. "No," I whispered, my voice trembling. But the abbey didn't care about my protests. The monk raised his hand, and the book flew from my grasp, opening in midair. The pages turned on their own, settling on the same glowing passage I'd read before. The jagged symbol shone brighter, burning into the air itself. "You must choose," the voice repeated, louder this time. The monk was almost upon me, his skeletal fingers outstretched. I felt the abyss calling.